Welcome back to another episode of Cracking the Shell on Psychological Science. I'm Mike, and today I'm here with Dr. Jessica Magidson, a professor of psychology and the director of the Center for Substance Use, Addiction, and Health, and GMAP, Global Mental Health Lab. Welcome to the show, Jess.
Thanks, Mike.
So we like to do these little episodes where we learn a little bit about the person behind the science. You see the science, but you don't always know much about the person doing the science. And so first question for you, where did you grow up, and how did you get interested in psychology?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to share a little bit more about my background. I grew up in Morristown, New Jersey, and I think when I think back to some of the salient memories growing up and kind of what got me to the place I am at now is my father is a pathologist, and I would spend a lot of time with him in his lab. And what looks like a pathology lab is quite different than a psychology lab. But we would go and I would look under the microscope, and he would explain kind of different diagnostics and really immerse me in his world of being in a lab setting. And I think one of the things that I noticed from an early age was I was always curious about not necessarily the specific images under the microscope, but what would happen to these people when they received these diagnoses, or how were families affected? And so just kind of like always noticing my own curiosity about the emotional or psychological impacts of different medical conditions on people's lives.
So this planted the seeds of becoming a clinical psychologist then?
Yeah, I think so. I always knew I was interested in a health-related field, but it planted the seeds in kind of understanding this intersection between mental health and physical health, or I trained specifically in something called behavioral medicine. So it's really about understanding, how do we support people when they're adjusting to different medical conditions, or how can we support people through living with a chronic condition. So I think it really helped me understand my propensity for understanding these more psychological impacts. I think that was one thing. I think the other thing, growing up, we spent a lot of time doing community service. And so
nice.
From an early age, which I've now started with my young children, we would serve meals at homeless shelters on Thanksgiving, Christmas, holiday. We had a lot of other volunteer opportunities that were regular parts of my life. And so I think I got exposed to, from an early age, through a lot of the service that my mom was leading, looking at understanding that not everyone had the same privileges that we had. And I got comfortable also working with people who, were unstably housed or actively using substances. And so I think it just opened my eyes from a young age about the world that we live in, but also really wanting to make a deeper impact in the work that I do.
Wait, when did you know that psychology was the field that you wanted to go into?
To be honest, and I probably shouldn't say this to my boss and chair of the psychology department, I'm still not necessarily sure about that. I think the things that I care about, I'm very values aligned. Like, I really care about making an impact in my work. I care about working in underserved communities. I care about doing research that is going to change people's lives. And I think that could be through public health. It could be through psychology. I think for me, I found this beautiful balance of doing public health oriented work in a psychology department. But for me, what has always driven me is really the impact. And I think when I was thinking about different career paths, I considered medicine, I considered public health, and I considered psychology. And I ultimately went with clinical psychology because I knew I wanted to have both that individual level impact of seeing patients, being able to deliver evidence-based care while also getting rigorous training and research. And I think this balance between clinical and research is something that was really appealing. So hopefully that's an okay answer to a chair of a psychology department.
No. Well, you don't want to know my story. It was like a comedy of errors, basically, stumbling around until I finally found myself in graduate school.
That's how it normally works. Yeah.
Totally by accident, for sure. So if you had to give advice to some undergraduates who were, say, maybe considering psychology as a career, what advice would you give them?
I think I would stay curious. I think part of my experience was when I was an undergraduate, I volunteered or did research for credit in a number of different labs, and just started to notice what are the questions that I found most interesting, what are the settings that I enjoyed working in. When I was an undergraduate, I ended up having my most impactful research experience at a local medical center. So there was an academic medical center affiliated with the university where I was in school, and rather than for me, necessarily working in a psychology lab on campus, I wanted to have that behavioral medicine focus working in a medical center. And so I was able to create a research experience at the local medical center, which, wasn't on our list of available internships as psychology undergraduates, but I was able to work closely with faculty and create that experience that ultimately led me to be doing the type of work that I ended up doing as a PhD student as well.
Oh, fascinating. So I have another follow-up question to that. Some of us end up, I think, benefiting from like we can go back in time and say that this person here is the one that sort of steered me in the right direction. Was there someone like that in your life that kind of said, Jess, maybe you ought to try this career in psychology, or did you just kind of find it yourself?
I think it was a few people seeing the work that they were doing that influenced me. And so one of them was this person that I was just talking about. He was a clinical psychologist at Dartmouth, where I was for undergrad at the Academic Medical Center. His name was Dr. Mark Hagel, and he was doing really beautiful work integrating depression treatment into medical settings. And I just saw the impact of the work he was doing and saw that balance for the first time of okay, this is the type of work I want to be doing. He was one. And then the second was, his name is Dr. Bruce Rapkin, and he is a clinical psychologist who also public health trained, who was doing a lot of work around mental health effects of HIV and mental health interventions. And I was a summer intern as an undergraduate in his lab at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and he allowed me to interview people living with HIV and AIDS about their mental health impacts, and just gave me some really impactful experiences as an undergrad that really shifted my interests and got me also doing work at the intersection of mental health and HIV.
That is so cool. Quick question. You do work here in the state of Maryland. You do work here in the local community around campus, but you also do work in South Africa. How do you manage to do all of these different projects that literally span the globe? If you don't mind saying it. I'm sorry. I don't want to embarrass you, but...
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'd love to share a little bit more about how I started doing work in South Africa. It's a lot, and I think it's really being intentional about what are the partnerships that enable the work to happen, and how do I invest time in those partnerships? And we bring a lot of students, both undergraduates, master's students, PhD students, into this work, and they own a lot of the work that we do here in Maryland and in South Africa. Luckily, I'm an early morning person because global health requires a lot of very early morning calls. And I have a very supportive partner at home because I also have 3 young children. And so it is a lot to balance, but I think just being thoughtful and intentional about my time and bringing trainees in has really enabled it all to work well.
Speaking of training, if an undergraduate student wanted to maybe get involved in your lab, is there somebody that they can contact?
Yeah, definitely. So we have someone on our team. Her name's Amy Billing, and she oversees a lot of our training experiences, and we'd love to bring new students in. And for me, all of my work in South Africa first started after I taught a study abroad course at the University of Maryland. So for 2 years in a row, I brought undergraduates and master's students to South Africa to learn about the history of apartheid and HIV and the psychological and public health impacts of that. And so not only did that have a huge impact on my own work, but also I would really encourage people to look at other study abroad opportunities as well, particularly through the School of Public Health.
All right. Is there a website they can go to get in contact with Amy or someone else on your team?
Yeah, please check out the CSER website. So it's caesar.umd.edu, and she oversees training for
and
our team.
It's not like Julius Caesar, right? It's
CESAR.umd.edu.
Perfect. All right. Jess, Wonderful having you on. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.